The Little Rock Nine was a group of 9 African American students that were the first to integrate and attend a previously segregated school in America in 1957. Occurring after the Supreme Court case of Brown v. Board of Education back in 1954, which ruled that American state laws establishing racial segregation in public schools are unconstitutional, the Little Rock Nine were the first students to embark on the journey of desegregation in their town of Little Rock, Arkansas. At first entry, the students were denied access by National Guardsmen and harassed off campus by a vicious mob. The integration crisis then rose to a national level to the point where President Eisenhower announced in a televised address that he is going to send in U.S. Army troops from the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock to enforce federal order and integrate Central High School. The Little Rock Nine spearheaded future integration and changed the shape of America by persevering through intense opposition such as profound racism, by influencing others to integrate, and by creating a landmark in the history of the civil rights movement in America itself.
The Nine were welcomed with and experienced extreme racism throughout their schooling at Little Rock Central. Almost every day they were met with an angry racist mob upon entry. In their deafening screams, they would threaten the students constantly. Daisy Bates, one of the largely influential activists at the time, recalled in her memoir that she even heard people yelling, "Get her, lynch her," when the female students walked by. However, the Nine did not let any obstacle stand in the way of their determination. The students not only faced racism outside the school, but throughout their entire day within the campus. In one instance, a white student named Hugh Williams knocked out one of the Little Rock Nine members with a punch to the head, and a medical assistance was required. Hugh's offense was punished with only a meager 3-day suspension and continued to live on to be a Little Rock Fire Department captain without any regard to his past actions.
Melba Patillo, one of the members of the Little Rock Nine, was just one of the many to be subjected to the harsh and obscene racism. More specifically, she wrote a memoir called Warriors Don't Cry about her experiences in the school. Patillo recalls back to the time of a school rally where she stood as an obvious minority among other white students. After the gathering, she was approached by 4 football player-type students who knocked her books and papers onto the ground, pushed her into a dark corner underneath the auditorium balcony, and then proceeded to pin her against a wall. A forearm then pressed hard against her throat, choking her to the point where she wasn't able to speak and could barely breathe. She writes in her memoir the exact words spoken to her as she was pinned. "We're going to make your life hell. You all are going to go screaming out of here, taking those loving soldiers with you." Patillo continued to write about that day, but what was the most significant was what she wrote in her personal diary later that night. "After 3 full days inside Central, I know that integration is a much bigger word than I thought." Melba continued to attend school fighting for integration, but only for a short while longer before transferring to pursue her college education.
Following Brown v. Board in 1954, the Little Rock School Committee and Superintendent began to implement a desegregation plan. By 1957, 9 African American school children were set to attend Central High School in Little Rock in the fall of that year. On September 2nd, 2 days before the first day of school, Orville Faubus, the governor of Arkansas, announced that he intended to call the National Guard to surround the campus the next day. When it came time for the first day of school, National Guardsmen, as thought to protect the students and maintain civil obedience, instead blocked the perimeter, holding back any minority trying to get through. To make matters worse, a mob of protesting citizens awaited the arrival of the black students to harass and antagonize them to drop their books and go home.
Rejected by the National Guard, quote-unquote for their own safety, 19 days passed until the students would attend school again. Since the Brown v. Board case made it illegal to prevent students from attending schools regardless of race, the integration crisis worked its way all the way up to President Eisenhower, who signed an executive order to deploy troops into Little Rock. The order dictated that all Army personnel in Arkansas were to be under federal control and to proceed with the desegregation process. Governor Faubus's National Guardsmen would step down from their posts, and armed troops would escort the 9 throughout their day in and out of the building, protecting them from any opposition.
This fueled hatred in the South, but their influence was loud enough to make a call to action and affect many others in the near and far future. Quoted from an interview with Kathy Ann Reddick of Cambridge, Massachusetts, "My parents raised us in the NAACP, and as an adult, I served as a branch president for 16 years in Cambridge. The impact of the Little Rock Nine, as well as Brown v. Board of Education, helped to direct my work in advocating for students and families within our school's district. Even 50 years after the actual events, the effects of the Nine's legacy and purpose are still seen and experienced. What happened in 1957 also opened a window of opportunity, a chance to join in and stand for the civil rights movement. In an interview with Ernest Green, the very first member of the Little Rock Nine to graduate Central High, he says,
"A lot of people, their moments come and they go. They don't, they aren't able to take advantage of it, and they're not prepared for it. And part of what I think we accomplished in Central was that you got to be ready and you got to be prepared, and that's what we were trying to lay the groundwork for."
The Nine did accomplish their goal of laying the groundwork for opportunity, as proven by the soon-to-come unprecedented amount of support towards integration.
When it comes to taking a charge against segregation and fighting for one's rights, the Little Rock Nine truly stood as influential figures and a permanent step forward in the progression of the fight for African American rights. In the following year of 1958, there was a substantial amount of controversy surrounding the continuation of desegregation in Little Rock. Segregation won the popular vote over integration, grants for postponement of integration were requested and appealed, but overall, the act of the Nine students back in 1957 left a mark, and it shows. On October 25, 1958, nearly 10,000 students, led by baseball player Jackie Robinson, singer Harry Belafonte, and political leader A. Philip Randolph, held a Youth March for Integrated Schools rally in Washington, D.C., which greatly gained support towards the efforts of desegregation. Ernest Green also quoted, "The thing integration demonstrated is that as you challenge the system, it doesn't stop with schools. It extends to include all other arrangements and relationships. Once you open Pandora's box and let the genie out, you can't put the genie back in. Once one aspect is integrated, more importantly, a public institution, others will follow in its footsteps."
Serious oppression as a result of integration, on the other hand, inspired others to take a stand and fight for the basic human rights of all. Thousands of Americans began to support desegregation following Central High. College students organized the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or the SNCC, to create activities aimed at desegregating places of public accommodation and recreation in the South. Peaceful demonstrations were held as well in every major city where racial segregation was practiced openly. Many were arrested, students were expelled, and people got fired for their contribution. However, one or more establishments in each of the 108 southern and border cities had been desegregated as a result.
How do you think your life would have been different if Central High was not desegregated and you were not a part of the Little Rock Nine?
Well, I'd like to think that I would have gone on to school somewhere, gone on to college somewhere, that I would have tried as hard as I could to, have a decent job, raise a family.
Even though the Nine were not the first to subsidize to the civil rights movement, they were truly monumentous contributors and heroes. They tested the legitimacy of the Brown versus Board of Education case, which in the end worked in their favor with long-lasting benefits. They proved to America that integrated schools were possible. They stood on top of the horrible past of dehumanization and mistreatment of African Americans. Unfortunately, racism still exists prominently in modern-day America. When the Brown versus Board was decided in 1954, 755 school districts were pressured into integration, and as of 2009, 268 school districts were still being told to integrate. This number should be zero, and total equality is the ultimate goal, but nonetheless, integration alone would not have been possible without the Little Rock Nine.
And I think what we all are, I believe, going to have a Central High School moment. The question is, can you recognize it and can you benefit from it?